I was extremely overconfident in my ability to just do whatever I wanted. I bought a practice there, almost sight unseen, thinking I'm amazing, I'm awesome, I can do anything, anywhere.
Yeah.
And learned the hard way that that's not true.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tooth or Dare podcast, peeps, with your peep Irene. How are you? It's been a little while since I've recorded an on-video introduction, and I think I'm going to start doing a few more of them, giving you some updates on what's happening in my office. I've had a little bit of a hiatus over the last 14 days. I finally took a vacation, like a proper 2-week long vacation. I went to Spain and to Ireland. Started off in Barcelona for a few days, just kind of solo traveling, and then found my way to Ibiza, where I met up with some of my friends and celebrated one of my friends' 40th birthdays. And then from there, I did 4 days in Dublin. Again, like solo traveling through Dublin. That was really fun. I got to meet a lot of really cool people, and that was really exciting. So if you've been following along on my Instagram and my stories mostly, I shared a little bit about my travels. Fun fact that I learned: what does a pint of Guinness and a toothbrush have in common? The answer is that the perfect pint of Guinness needs to be held at a 45-degree angle to be poured perfectly. And also your toothbrush needs to be held at a 45-degree angle for the perfect brush. So there you go. I learned something about beer and connected it to dentistry, even though I was on vacation. This week's episode is kind of a 2-part series with a little bonus at the end, interviewing Dr. Jason Luchtefeld, who is the current president of the AES, the Academy of Equilibration Dentistry or Equilibration Society. We spoke in Chicago very briefly about kind of his journey through dentistry, what led him to where he is, graduated from Chicago, has moved around as a dentist, and now living in Canada. So we talked about the conversion of his license and kind of what drove him to leave where he was working to become a dentist in Canada, and a variety of other kind of accolades. He talks about ICOI and implant dentistry, his history with being Dawson trained, and now his partnership with Inspiro as a strategic planner, and really works with dentists and dental team members to have them really fulfill their organizational dreams. And it's a lot of really interesting team building activities. So all of that information will be linked in the description below. I encourage you to reach out to him, or if you have any questions about building your team. And he's actually helped me quite a bit, just giving me some ideas for a team retreat that I held for my social media and kind of my planning team. We rented up this really cool little chalet and did a lot of really interesting activities that Jason recommended. So he's a really smart guy and very knowledgeable in how to really build good core teams and core values and have everyone feel like they're part of the growth of the business. So if you're looking for someone to help you dissect your practice and kind of put some different elements back in that might help you strive to greater success, then I encourage you to reach out to him. Until next time, peace out, peeps.
Welcome back to the Tooth or Dare podcast, peeps, with your peep Irene. Hello, I'm joined by a guest whom you've already heard his introduction, of course, because I diligently recorded it from the introduction that he diligently shared with me after the episode was recorded. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
How are you, Jason?
I'm
Mr.
excellent.
President.
Yeah, sitting here in Chicago on what feels like a summer day is just amazing. When February is usually not like this in Chicago, so it makes it for like a more pleasant day. I walked here. I walked 2.5 miles to get here.
And I would walk 500 miles. Wow. So we're recording live in Chicago at the Chicago Midwinter Conference, which you are not even attending.
Correct.
There's a lot of information that you're going to share with us very shortly about all of the cool things that you do that I don't even really know. I mean, you and I met recently, on Instagram, and then you have a study club, and then I'm going to speak at your study club. And then we were supposed to go for coffee, but instead that turned into a podcast episode.
Yes. Which is much more stimulating than coffee.
depends how much caffeine is in the coffee.
Right.
Because depending on that caffeine level.
This is more like an energy drink level.
Intellectual stimulation. So tell me about you. Like, take me back to birth. What was that like for you? Or how go back to the beginning?
Yeah, it was fairly traumatic coming out and
feet, head,
seeing
arms, which direction?
Sun.
Yeah.
For the first time, those bright lights in the room.
Yeah.
Still remember them blinding me and just screaming. And ever since, I've hated bright lights.
Oh.
Yeah,
do we need sunglasses?
It's fairly dramatic.
For you in here?
I'm having a hard time in this room. Actually, it reminds me of when I was birthed. Yeah.
Yeah. It does
so that was 1975.
Okay.
I know that guy. It's weird to be here.
1975.
Yes.
What's your birthday?
April.
Yep. Coming up.
Yep.
Cool.
And I grew up in a really small town, Southern Illinois. So cornfields, soybean fields.
How far from here?
3.5 hours straight south.
Straight south.
Yeah.
As the crow flies.
Yes.
Cool.
The interstate does not veer from here. It goes straight to where I'm from.
Okay.
Small town called Effingham, Illinois. Interestingly, that is the mothership for Heartland Dental. For those of you that know about Heartland,
it's a DSO.
The gigantic DSO around the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And so life in Effingham was good, easy, active. From there, went to a small college, university for a few years. Decided on dentistry.
Were you in the band? Did you play an instrument?
No.
I ask everyone what they did.
Yeah, I tried my 8th grade. I tried band. I tried a trumpet. I had an uncle that played trumpet, so he let me borrow his trumpet.
Yeah.
I lasted a week and quit that, and I joined the chorus.
The chorus, like singing?
Yeah.
Okay.
and I did chorus for half a year, whatever the term was for the chorus time.
Okay.
And didn't ever do that again. Realized I was not made for those artistic musical things and went into sports stuff instead. So did track and football.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then, so you became a dentist. Where'd you go to undergrad?
Southern Illinois University. Okay. So that was in Edwardsville, which is the school most people have not heard of, because the main school is in Carbondale, which is kind of the famous location for that school. But the dental school was in Alton, which is close to St. Louis. So spent 7 years in that area. So undergrad and then dental school was all kind of in the same 50-mile radius location. And that was great. I loved dental school.
Yeah.
Had fun.
Did you always know you wanted to be a dentist?
Nope. Started out in accounting.
Stop.
Yeah. First year of college. Because I was good at math. Math was easy. I took an accounting class in high school that was really easy. So I thought, I want to be an accountant. So I started out in university in accounting. And I had a paper to write. It was for a writing class I was doing my first year. And that writing class, we were told to go write an article about the profession that we wanted to join. So I had to interview 3 people. All 3 people I interviewed, there were 3 accountants. They all said, don't become an accountant.
That's funny.
So I said, okay, maybe I should rethink this. My mom told me I should be a orthodontist, and because she had worked for one whenever I was a little kid. And so I went and shadowed an orthodontist, and I thought it was incredibly boring because it was just the same thing all day long. And I didn't like that. So I shadowed a general dentist, and I loved the variety that they had, that they were exposed to and could do. And then in dental school, that was just reinforced that I could do restorative stuff. I could do surgical stuff. Could do all the things. And I loved that variety aspect. So from there, did a residency at a VA hospital in Denver. And that was awesome experience.
What does that look like?
So the VA hospital was nice because all of our patients, most of the patients, had full coverage for treatment. So we didn't have to worry about paying. So we could just
do what needed to get done
and ideally treat. We had a prosthodontist on staff. We had oral surgeon on staff. So we got to rotate through the OR and do all kinds of crazy fun things and get exposure to some more complex treatment options, treatment planning, and then execution that don't get in dental school. So
and is it like shift work, or what does that look like timing wise? What was the commitment for you?
Yeah. So our program, where there were 4 residents, so the only thing we had to rotate through in like a shift sort of format was the ER. So we each had to spend, I guess it would be 3 months with an ER rotation, where we had to go into the ER and be on call and potentially get called to come in and see emergencies during that 3 months. And those 3 months were not consecutive. It was 1 month that we rotated 3 times. So
would you recommend that?
Absolutely. I think it was fantastic. It didn't teach me anything about business, but clinically, when I went into practice, I was supremely more confident in what I could do and how to do it than I would have been if it was just out of school.
Interesting.
So I loved it. I would highly recommend a residency to.
And it was general GPR, right?
Yeah.
Residency.
Yeah.
And then what?
Then I went and opened a practice from scratch up in Colorado. It went great.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was.
Why did you choose to do a startup versus acquire a practice?
It's partly because of the demographics. I reached out to dentists first to see if anybody was interested in bringing in a young kid. None of them were, but doing demographic studies of the location, it looked ripe for a new practice to open up. So at the time, looking back, I would say I was extremely overconfident in my ability to just do whatever I wanted.
Isn't that like the norm though? Like,
yeah,
just starting out and you're like, I can do anything.
Yes.
And then by the time you have to actually figure it out, you're like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah, I didn't learn that until after. So I did that for 5 years, and I sold that practice and moved to Florida. And I bought a practice there, almost sight unseen, thinking I'm amazing. I'm awesome. I can do anything, anywhere.
Yeah.
And learned the hard way that that's not true. That there are situations that are harder than others that you can't just will your way through making it work. So it was a very old practice. So the physical space was really bad, really old equipment that I had 2 different instances where I was working on a patient. It was a really old, like a really old school cart system.
Yeah.
And gosh, I wish I had a picture of that. It's so funny.
Yeah.
So old that when it started to like fade on the front, the guy put wallpaper on it to like aesthetically improve what was there. And it had
wallpaper, not paint it.
No.
Wallpaper. Great.
So that was peeling.
Just to hold all of the moisture.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of the aerosols.
Yeah. And it had horses on it.
Horses?
Yeah.
It's just because he likes horses.
Yeah.
That's nice.
One of the rooms, it had like a sailboat theme.
Yeah.
And so that one had like a water on the wallpaper. Because it was, the whole room had like
to
boats
match?
and things. Yeah, of course. As one does. And
what did you pay for this practice?
I thought I was getting a good deal.
Oh.
So I thought it was like going to be a diamond in the rough kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like old dude, not doing much anymore.
Lots of treatment that's not done. No treatment planning. Yeah.
That was what I thought I was getting into. And that was partially correct. But I was also coming into a place that needed a complete overhaul. So had to start working on that. So with that.
Did you do that though? So it must be difficult because then you're doing 2 things, right? You're coming in and you're changing the dynamic of the practice, the way that treatment planning is happening, the procedures that are done, where perhaps, I don't know if he was more of a carpenter, kind of like fix what's broken sort of mentality. And then you're changing the physical space too. So on the patient side, what was the retention like? That was one of my biggest fears of opening a practice from someone else's problems. How do you retain if you do have more provocative and forward thinking types of treatment planning philosophies?
That is normally a big problem.
Yes.
My situation, it wasn't nearly as bad. It was like the patients were ready for it. It helped. The guy was like 77.
They knew. They were like, this guy's on his way out. Let's hope that the next one that comes in is more with it.
So the patients that stuck around because he was a nice dude, not because like they were suspicious that they were not getting the best dentistry.
Yeah.
So they welcomed me with open arms. The team, same way. Like they were happy to see somebody now fixing things. But they also thought they might just be losing their job because they didn't know if the practice was going to sell. So that situation was somewhat unique in that I didn't have a problem with retention or anything else. My problem was the physical space and just the sheer lack of number of patients.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize how many new patients I was going to need.
How many patients did the practice have?
Not many, like a few hundred.
Ooh, that's not. And what was the space? How many ops?
It was 3 ops, and I added a 4th.
3 ops, had a 4th. So 2 doc ops, 2 hygiene, or
yeah, correct.
So that is definitely not enough. I mean, I think statistically they say you need about 400 patients per op to keep a clinician busy. Ish.
Yeah. So the size of the practice itself was exactly what I wanted. I like that small office feel and the pace that I wanted to work. It fit all that. But number of patients, severely lacking. And it was in Fort Lauderdale. And so there was a dental practice in my same building. There was a dental practice across the street. There was a dental practice 2 doors down.
Yep.
So then I went from a small town in Colorado where the demographics were ripe for me to just go in and open from scratch. And I was flooded with people to a practice that I needed to now find a way to get people to come find me and see me. And
how'd you do that?
It wasn't happening. Well, I joined PPOs for one because he was in them to start with.
For the Canadians, tell us what that is.
Oh, it's a insurance company that when you join, you agree to their fees.
Right.
And
they'll flood you with patients, but you're at a what was the
you're then on a list
right
that the patients can choose from to come see.
Right.
And
but it's at like 30 to 40% less than the regular fee guide.
That's right.
Yeah.
So work through that. The biggest thing was the physical space and how it was falling apart. One fun story. So I had a patient that was a contractor. So I did a rehab on him and we bartered. It's been long enough that I can now say this publicly.
Yeah, that's okay.
And not get in trouble.
I mean, hey.
Right?
Why? Is that not allowed?
Correct. If you barter, you're supposed to still claim it on your taxes. But
it's a tax thing.
So
call the IRS.
Yeah, this was 20 years ago though. So I think I'm okay. So hopefully.
So he did a reconstruction of your practice.
Just the ceiling.
Oh, just the ceiling.
So it had an old drop ceiling.
Oh, okay.
And so there was a bunch of places where it had leaked and it was like gross.
Yeah.
And the old dentist used that for storage. I found journals from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s up there.
Kind of cool.
And that was kind of neat, but they were disgusting because mice
all moldy.
had been up there
and
gross. Rats.
Oh,
and so
all right, we're done with this practice.
Yeah,
Please tell me you sold it.
I did.
Yeah.
But before I sold it, it had carpet as well. So
in the stairy?
Yeah.
Oh, so I love stairy wet carpet.
Yep.
That's my favorite.
When we did the ceiling, I knew I was going to do the floor as well. So we did the ceiling. When we took the old ceiling out, we found 2 rat carcasses.
Nice.
That was pretty cool. And it just stunk. It was so disgusting.
Okay.
So pulled that out.
Everyone listening on lunch now is just like, who's this Jason guy? When is he going to stop talking about this practice? Right. Okay, so you sold it.
So then we ripped the carpet out too at the same time.
Well, okay.
So just redid it with all like wood flooring and a new drop ceiling, and it completely altered the smell and appearance of the practice. Okay, so sold that. I moved back to Illinois, and I bought a practice there that was very successful and a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and that's what I then sold in 2021.
It's kind of cool that you've moved around so much.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see dentistry in different places. I feel like in Canada, you're very like, you feel landlocked almost.
Yeah.
So difficult to get your license somewhere else, and now you live in Canada, which we'll talk about too. But I think in the United States, for more than in Canada, clinicians, it's easier to get a license, or there's reciprocity from state to state. And how would you perceive dentistry to be different from Colorado to Florida to Illinois? Like of those, which do you feel best fit your clinical style or philosophy at the time? So I'm sure things have changed for you since. Where did you like practicing the most and why?
Yeah, Colorado has a special place in my heart because it was a practice that I started from scratch and was able to shape and mold exactly how I want. So it was very small, but had everything I wanted and needed. And so
practice baby.
Yep. And practice, practice mix, like the clinical mix of things was good. It wasn't overly complicated, but I wasn't into doing anything too crazy anyway. Florida was different, a much more high maintenance population, much more cosmetic stuff being asked and desired. And that wasn't a good fit for me.
Yeah.
Illinois was also really good, just more blue collar.
Regular folks.
Yeah. But then the occasional need for a rehab here and there and more complex stuff. And oftentimes a willingness to do it when appropriate. So the practice in Illinois was a bit bigger than what I would like to have personally. It was more of like a 2-doctor practice.
Yeah.
That we tried to squeeze into a 1-doctor practice, but still good.
That's
it was a
cool.
good place. Yep.
And then, so you moved again.
Yes.
And you've started a different business, and you are also now day one of being president of a really kind of cool. How did I feel like this part of your life, the last 10 to 7 years, you've switched a lot of stuff. So
yeah,
where are you? And I know the story, which is why I'm being so stupidly vague, but why are you in Canada? And how do you practice in Canada? And what does your clinical professional life look like now?
That was a lot of questions.
Welcome to the Tooth or Dare podcast. Irene has a hard time making sentences most days.
Let me make a list to make sure I cover all those questions. Okay, so I'm gonna answer the first question first.
Yeah,
that is what happened with what I'm doing now, or what happened with business versus dentistry stuff. So it was about 6 or 7 years ago that I met a guy named Bob Frazer. He introduced me to a couple other guys, Brian Coulon and Don Taylor. And we all got together and decided to try to create a business and merge it with Bob Frazer's business that was doing strategic planning, emotional intelligence workshop, and a new patient experience workshop, and some coaching. So we started that. It kind of fell apart with Bob. Still get along, but it wasn't a good match made in heaven. And so we're out doing our own thing where I'm the strategic planning guy and the other two guys do the other stuff is the main thrust. That's the condensed version of the story. And that has gradually developed into I would call it part-time business for me now that is based in Texas called Inspiro.
Yeah.
So that allowed me to, when I sold my practice in 21 is when it sold, and I transitioned out in a year and a half. So November of 22 was my last day in practice. And I moved
November 2022.
Yes.
Okay.
And so my wife is a dentist in Canada. So I moved to Canada so that she could be my sugar mama. And I can do this other stuff. So I'm not practicing dentistry. I did look into getting a license and decided that I didn't need to or want to at this point. And it also would have been doable, but very difficult with the necessity for like board exam kind of things that was all like 20 years ago. So now I'm just doing this as my attempt at still making a living.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you asked about was the...
Wait, I don't want to go away from that. Let's stick to Inspiro for now, and then we'll get into other stuff after.
Okay.
So what does that mean? So coaching, I think like coaching, consulting, such vague terms.
Yeah, it is. And it makes it hard to say, what do you do? It makes it hard to answer that question of what do you do? Because saying a consultant is the thing that is easiest to say, that people say, oh, okay, I know what that is. But that's not what I do. So I'm not there to tell people what to do. I'm not going to tell you how to run your office, how to do your job. I'm there to just facilitate a conversation, to try to get you to uncover what it is you want, and then help you to develop a plan to get what you want, both in life and practice. So that's the strategic planning side of it, that then coaching can be there to help with implementation of.
Yeah.
So then that's...
What would you say some of the goals that your clients have are that you help them plan for, or problems that you help them work through? What are like some of the major ones, big ones?
So when I'm going to say two different levels to that. One is the solo dentist, private practitioner that is kind of feeling burnt out, alone, and is trying to plan for their life and their practice. And as a dentist, the practice is what feeds the ability to have the life you want. So it's figuring out with your significant other what you want in life, and then figuring out how the practice can support that. So that piece of it for the dentist is what ultimately feeds the idea of having more of a purpose, having more fulfillment, is just figuring that out for oneself.
Yeah.
And then being able to take action on it. When it comes to the practice, it's then usually communication is the biggest thing. There just isn't good communication.
Like within the walls of the practice, with each person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the dentist to the team to the dentist, the team to patient, patient to team. All of those things are typically in need of work. And just working on that can provide a world of difference in how a practice feels on a day-to-day basis and functions. So that's the big piece for private practice. The other would be a corporation. And that could be a dental corporation. It could be a DSO. It could be a widget company. Would all be done kind of similarly, where you bring together a team of people from all parts of the business. So you create a team of 12 to 20 people that form your strategic planning committee. And those people create the vision for the future of the company. And then there's a number of things we do to disseminate a back and forth conversation amongst the rest of the company to get input on the whole process and then how to execute it.
Interesting. So these are all things that I wish we knew more about in school as early clinicians, that like, hey, once upon a time you started in this program and eventually you're going to end up being here. Like, these are things that you should start working on early.
Yes.
Because I'm sure that you find people come to you when they're at that limit. They're like, I'm about to set this place on fire, until they bring you in to help them solve some of these problems. Why do you think that there's such a gap in knowledge for dental people on how to be better business owners? Do you think it's our egos? Like, is it that we're just too busy becoming great clinicians that we forget that the operational side is sometimes far more important? Like, what do you think is the core problem?
Yeah, I think dental school does feature heavily on the clinical side. It's how to become someone that can execute to a micron level a number of different procedures. And being able to understand what is necessary to make that work takes a lot of time, effort, study, practice. And so by the time you have gone through that 4-year process for most people, it's all you can do to try to just put that into action. And it's it's a very rare dental school that provides the business acumen that needs to go along with that to allow you to do those things. And then it's even more rare for the dental school to provide the behavioral education on how do you communicate these things to patients in a way that allows them to still feel comfortable. And that's why I think we're also valuable in that we teach emotional intelligence, which is ultimately a communication workshop.
What does that mean? What is emotional intelligence?
So it came out of some research in the 80s that was centered around categorizing our ability to communicate with other people. And the researchers ultimately put it into 4 categories: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So those 4 pieces are what comprise emotional intelligence. It garnered a bunch of press when Daniel Goleman discovered this odd research paper and decided to write a book about it that was called Primal Leadership. So a lot of people have heard of that book. It's a really difficult book to read, but it is something that is critical for communication.
Just like one's ability to what?
Understand oneself in a way that allows you to regulate and manage your own emotions, to have relationship with other people.
Right. Okay. So, which we all struggle with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mightily. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So is that one of the core things that you and your team at Inspiro help educate not just doctors, but the entire team on how to manage and evaluate oneself?
Right.
Yeah.
So the emotional intelligence workshop focuses on that specifically. But even if we're doing strategic planning with an office, we still have conversation about how to have a conversation.
Yeah.
We still have to set boundaries and limits and expectations, and all of that are pieces of emotional intelligence. And so with any of these things, that comes into play by default because it's part of what sets the ground rules for having an open, honest ability to communicate with your team.
That's tough. It's hard. I really like this book, and they have a podcast called Radical Candor.
Yes.
Have we talked about this? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And one of the kind of core principles or key principles is how to, not lose your humanity while being a boss or being a leader. And they mention emotional intelligence quite a bit, because if you aren't able to understand yourself, then how is anyone else supposed to understand what you're trying to enforce? I say that quite loosely. But being personal with people is really important. And sometimes oversharing is a vulnerability technique in order to allow your team to trust you a little bit better. So we often feel like, well, I'm going to, close off and I'll put a smile on my face and not really tell anyone if I'm going through something. But that hinders your ability to connect with people on a much closer level. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The interesting thing you brought up there about having self-awareness, and if we don't know ourselves, how can other people know us? That's true. And we are also the worst at self-assessment.
Yeah.
We have a really difficult time being honest with ourselves. And so that we do some like really basic self-assessment exercises in the emotional intelligence workshop. It's just like a 12 questionnaire self-assessment about the 4 domains of emotional intelligence.
So what are some of these questions?
It's like, I'm aware when I'm feeling a certain way in a conversation, and I can manage that.
Oh, and how you manage it. Yeah.
It's just like very basic, like yes, no, or you score it on a 1 to 5. You give yourself a score.
Poorly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the interesting thing is the data on those types of things is horrible for determining how we are ourselves. What really works well is to do that with somebody that knows us really well.
Oh, so like that's BS. You're lying.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then that also allows you to have a conversation about it.
That's not how you handle things.
Yeah. Exactly.
You retreat to the bathtub for 4 hours.
Yes.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
I see.
So it's through that exploration, though,
that's cool,
that you build then the awareness of yourself that then can be used for intentionally creating vulnerability, which leads to trust.
Yeah.
And doing that intentionally versus on accident.
Yeah. You also have a podcast, which I've been listening to in a few episodes here and there. We were a podcast host who is a psychologist, correct?
Licensed family therapist.
Yes. Okay. And the two of you kind of go back and forth quite a bit on some of these principles. And I find it interesting that he can connect so closely to what we see in dentistry based on, his patients, that not all are dental people. How do you come up with the topics, and how do you come up with, this week we're going to talk about, I don't remember what you spoke about last week, but where does that come from?
It comes from this little 3-pound mass of flesh right here. A little embarrassingly, we don't plan it out. We go into a recording session and we say, how was your week?
Mm-hmm.
Good. How was your week? Good. What happened this week? Oh, I had this interesting conversation. And then that leads to more discussion. Or I had an interesting patient. Or, hey, I read this book. It was really cool. And here's what it was about. And we have a conversation about that. We've had a couple that we have actually planned that were based on, like, an article came out that was really interesting about the emotional landscape of cities.
Emotional landscape of cities.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a really fun one. Because these researchers attached essentially a form of a lie detector to people. So lie detector is just based on, like, sweat and pulse. So they attach these things and they correlated the physiological responses to data that people put in to how they were feeling throughout a day as they walked around a city. They were able to see areas of the city that caused people to be upset, depressed, angry, and areas of the city that caused people to be happy, joyous, etc. And they then looked at what is in these parts of the cities that caused this. And they can start to see from a city planning standpoint, what can we do to facilitate more
happy people,
joy in our city and less anger and disappointment. And they can redesign bus stops because of that. They can figure out where to put different art installments because of that. And so it's just like kind of a cool article that brought together this research side of things with psychology, with awareness of our emotions and all of that. And then they graphed it out. So you have some cool photos of a city and all these emotional highs and lows in different parts of the city.
Interesting.
So it was kind of cool. So we talked about that one time.
I feel like happy people are near water. I feel like that would be a thing for me.
Unless you almost drowned once, then you might not care for water very much.
Oh my gosh. I think we should wrap this part 1 and do a quick part 2 of where you are now. And let's talk about your presidency. So stay tuned for part 2. Talk about Mr. President's now presidency and what this actually means. Cool. Peace out, peeps.